right, we're here with Craig Anderson, IHSA Executive Director, and we're going to ask him a few different questions that we polled the wrestling community, and these are some of the questions, common questions that came up. First, thanks for spending the time with us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, first off, maybe a little bit of background on yourself. You came into the role for wrestling, and now you've transitioned into the head of the IHSA. Can you talk a little bit about your background in wrestling and how you transitioned with the IHSA?
Yeah, certainly. So before I was with the IHSA, I was an athletic director for a couple schools in Central Illinois, hosted a lot of wrestling tournaments. Obviously not as involved with wrestling as I became when I came to the IHSA office about 7 years ago now. So I spent 6 years as the assistant executive director overseeing wrestling for the state, worked very closely with coaches and officials, and thoroughly enjoyed that experience, enjoyed being back here at the state finals again this year. And then obviously just finished my first full year as executive director of the association, where I have more oversight for all activities beyond just the 3 sports I had as an assistant executive director.
Okay, great. In your experiences, what makes the Illinois State Wrestling Tournament so special and different from other states?
Yeah, well, I don't have a good comparison because I haven't attended, state finals in particular of many state associations, but it's my belief, and I hear from those that have a perspective, I believe, of state events like our state finals, that the Grand March that we have, and I would also say the quality of wrestling and that we have really stands out nationally, I think, and so we're able to get some fantastic matchups and matches in our state finals, which really, in my opinion, is what it's all about. And so that to me is, the excitement of, leading up all throughout this weekend in preparation for and anticipation of the key matchups that we're going to see on Saturday night, and then all that kind of comes about prior to with the Grand March, and then, when the matches occur, it's just a great atmosphere.
Yeah, so I may have gotten the answer to the next question, but what do you most look forward to every year at the state tournament?
Yeah, well, one of the things is obviously the event on Saturday night, right. But, coming back in my role, to me it's about the people, wrestling, whether it be coaches, officials, or, just the volunteers that we get to come here and be table help. Everybody, they return year after year after year. I've talked to a number of folks this weekend that, say this is whatever year it is for them. They started coming in 1968 or 1973, or the longevity of folks that continue to want to be here, take time out of their schedule to be here, travel from out of state just to come and help us with this event. Really, to me, that's what I look forward to every year, is seeing those people that have helped me in my previous role and continue to help us, IHSA, put on a fantastic event.
Okay. So now some of the tougher questions. The regional and sectional tournaments, we're talking on the individual side, are double elimination, but the state tournament is not. Have there been any discussions in making the state tournament a true double elimination tournament so that everyone can get a wrestle back?
Yeah, we've had that discussion with coaches. Our advisory committee meets annually, and they'll likely review that again. And so it really comes down to, what's possible within the time constraints we have with State Farm Center, with what is our member schools are going to allow us to do and want us to do, because ultimately it comes down to that. We're governed by a board of directors. The advisory committee, which is made up of wrestling coaches, is going to make a number of recommendations, one of which might be, what's possible to do when it comes to full wrestlebacks at the state finals. And to date, we've just been restricted on time or, safety of kids and trying to fit all that in a relatively short time frame.
Okay. Is there any concern with, I know one of the possibilities is potentially starting the tournament maybe a little bit earlier on Thursday. Is that a concern with the IHSA of starting it earlier on Thursday because of travel in for the tournament and those kind of things? Do you want to keep the number of matches on Thursday where it's at now, or is that a possibility?
Well, I think it's possible.
Okay.
When we expanded to 3 days, I felt like our board at the time who made that decision, and that's a big decision. We expanded the number of wrestlers that get to come to state when we did that. I think there's a balance between what the State Farm Center is going to allow us to do with their setup, because we don't have a full week's rent of the facility here, so we got to that requires them some setup. If they could have a basketball game on Wednesday night and then flip the facility for our event on Thursday, and it's just not feasible for them to have it ready that early on Thursday. Granted, the last couple of years we've been fortunate that we were able to get in on Wednesday because they haven't had those, but the Big Ten could say, tell Illinois you're going to be hosting this game, and the schedule comes out, and so we have to allow for that. And so there's just some time restrictions. I worry about time away from school for kids. Our member schools, our principals, I think, will be concerned about that if we say that we're going to require more of their time. And I realize that right now we have some schools that travel in on Wednesday night. They're here on Thursday morning. The fact that we wait to start wrestling at 1 o'clock, but we still have some more local teams that don't do that travel, and so as a result, I think it will continue to be discussed, but there are some limitations with trying to do something earlier.
Along the same lines of time schedule, every wrestler competing at the state tournament weighs in at the same time, but some, like on Thursday, didn't wrestle for nearly 8 hours afterwards. Has there been any discussions on staggering the weigh-ins similar to what some other states do, where each class has a set weigh-in time before they're going to compete?
Yeah, we've talked about that. Just the last couple of years, that discussion has occurred at the advisory committee level, and we'll continue to have that discussion. This is the first year we're here at State Farm Center where the renovation is complete, and for the last few years we were not sure what we'd find ourselves into. So a little bit has to do, in my opinion, with the logistics of getting a full class in. You're going to have wrestling ongoing if you stagger those, and many will say, well, just conduct it off site, but that's a little tricky too. Having scales off site, then having some scales on site for some weight checks, and that balance. So discussions will continue on that, and if there's an area of State Farm Center that we feel like logistically we can get a class 2A as an example in closer to a weigh-in of when they're going to wrestle, we'll consider that.
Okay.
But as we've just probably in the last 3 or 4 years went to classes wrestling at different times, and so this is one of the outgrowths of concerns about that.
Right. So again, along the idea of time schedule, the semifinals used to be wrestled on Saturday morning in the old format. Some people have said they'd prefer to see those semifinals return to Saturday morning to go back more to that old format. And you got wrestlers that compete in the semifinals on Friday night and then wait almost a full 24 hours to compete on Saturday night, and again weigh in on Saturday morning. What are your thoughts on that, potentially adjusting that to put the semifinals back on Saturday?
Yeah, we'd be open to that discussion. I remember when we made the time schedule move, we added Thursday, and then in reconfiguring our time schedule, we moved those semifinals back to Friday night. I think, some people look forward to that session and the excitement. For the first time we have right now in our time schedule, we have all 3 classes together, and the excitement of that Friday night, while it's not what our championship is, it's really cutthroat and it's intense, and the excitement that brings on a Friday night versus a Saturday morning. I'm sure we'll have we have a group of folks that would prefer Saturday, but I think we have a group of folks that like it on Friday night and like the atmosphere that on Friday you get to look forward to that evening session of when you're going to have some intense battles to figure out who's going to wrestle in the championship. So it's a balancing act. I think we have people on both sides of that, but again, we're open to discussion if there's some things within the schedule that can be tweaked to make that, and our, the wrestling community, in particular our coaches, because we lean on our coaches in regards to time schedule and those kind of things. They're able to make recommendations for changes within our committee, so we're not opposed to it. But I just know when we made the change, we had a little bit of excitement, and I continued to like what the Friday night event kind of creates.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, it might be the first time a lot of people come down is Friday night, right? So they work during the week, Friday rolls around, they're excited to come down, see all the classes and the big exciting matchups. So yeah. I do see both sides of that. As far as atmosphere, one of the things people brought up is the quarterfinals, breaking those into classes right now. The 1A people roll in, and then a lot of times they'll leave, and the 2A people come in and then they'll leave. And, you lose a little bit of the atmosphere for the quarterfinal round, which is a great round. There's some fantastic matchups today. Has there been any thought of combining the classes for the quarterfinal, assigning 2 mats each so that everybody's going to be in the arena? I know one of the concerns could potentially be the 3A people wrestling Thursday night and can rolling right back in the morning and having to wrestle quarterfinals. But have you given any thought to that? I know there's been some issues potentially with multiple wrestlers on them from a team competing at the same time.
Yeah, we'd be open to that for sure. I'm as a fan, and at this point I find myself as a fan of wrestling. I think the arena would be more exciting when we had the fans from all 3 classes here together. And so if the coaches believe that they want to create that atmosphere on a Friday, I think we'd definitely be open to adjusting the time frame. So quarterfinal, Friday morning, we have all 3 classes together. You bring up a good point. If we're going to keep Thursday as staggered by class, that 3A has had a disadvantage. Now it takes away the argument of weigh-in staggered when on Friday we're going to have everybody together. But that was kind of a recommendation from the coaches, just to so a coach didn't have to be here all day. Coach and his team wouldn't have to be here all day. And so we try really in making the decision to go by classes on Friday was a decision recommended by the coaches, and so we went with that. But as a fan, I can see the excitement of, especially numbers of folks in the arena, to see all classes battling at the same time, quarterfinal matches in that case. So open to it, but obviously we're going to lean on what our coaches want. And right now, I think they prefer the opportunity to have some time away from State Farm Center, even though those teams that bring a number of kids to the finals, they find themselves in difficulty of overlapping some kids wrestling at the same time, whether it be in the wrestlebacks or their quarterfinals. When 6 mats have all classes going, it gets crowded. And so you have to have a pretty good sized coaching staff when you come to accommodate those. And those teams are fortunate to be in that situation, but it does create a little problem.
Right. If you're a Coal City with 11 qualifiers, you got a lot of guys potentially wrestling in that round.
Exactly.